So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tel, the HR business partner for Asia Select, and I will be your moderator for today. We've been working with Workplace from Facebook to bring you this exclusive online event. Organizations are tried and tested by challenges and disruptions that can affect day-to-day operations. This year, we have experienced a kind of disruption beyond expectation, the pandemic. From having an in-office meeting to joining them via Zoom, we have transitioned to a digital workspace where we meet and collaborate with our teams and colleagues online. Processes were not the only ones that have changed. The work from home setup also reshaped company culture positively. From being driven by employer values to employee values, we have transformed the system that puts employees' need at the heart of the business. By putting our people's well-being first, we give them a sense of belongingness that in turn drive their performance while working online. Enhancing or continuing this improved culture imposes a challenge to every leader. Today, we delve on the topic on how we can create more meaningful experience at and off work, or what we call employee experience or EX, in order to drive our business to success. And joining us today are our two panelists who are experts in their respective fields. Leaders, I'm pleased to introduce to you Vicky Skip and John Paul Orbetta. Vicky Skip is the head of Asia Pacific and Japan of Workplace from Facebook. With 25 years of experience, Vicky has demonstrated success driving strong technology adoption and innovation across the APAC region. Driven by a passion to help businesses grow at scale, she connects organizations with digital solutions to accelerate their processes. She is excited by the prospect of generational transformation in global workplaces and seeing the future authors of change as they explore new ways of communicating and expressing their creativity. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Vicky Skip. Hi, Vicky.
Hi, Tel, and hello, everyone. Just a pleasure to be here today.
All right. Our next panelist is John Philip Orbetta, the Managing Director, CHRO, and Group Head of Corporate Resources at Ayala Corporation. JP's role covers strategic human resources, information and communications technology, AC synergy, brand and reputation management, knowledge management, and corporate support services. Establishing a solid career in the field of human resources, he sits as a director on several boards across Ayala Group of companies, as well as external academic institutions and private companies. He has led and established several initiatives to drive synergy across the Ayala Group. Everyone, JP Orbetta. Hi, JP. Good afternoon.
Hi, Tel. Thanks for the introduction. And hi, Vicky. Glad to share a virtual stage with you.
Such a pleasure.
All right. So I think we're all set. Let's begin our panel discussion. In practice, employee experience, also known as EX, means understanding where and how HR can change people's day-to-day experiences at work. It's about moving from a world of complexity that's process first to a world of simplicity that's people first. The ultimate goal is to create a sense of belonging and unlock the innovation, creativity, productivity that only people can deliver. So Vicky and JP, what does a good employee experience mean to your company? Like how has your company been focusing on transforming EX? And do you really think that the employee experience is the future of work today? Why do you say so? Perhaps Vicky can go first.
Thank you, Tal. And again, I'm absolutely thrilled to be on the panel with JP today and thrilled to hear his views too. I think when it comes to employee experience, EX starts at the very top of your organization and filters through the organization, connecting every single employee. And the way that that's materialized in Facebook is we have Mark Zuckerberg who does a QA with the entire organization every Friday morning. And as an employee, we can post questions to Mark, and Mark and his team will answer our questions. And there is absolute transparency in the way questions are asked and information is shared. Now, when we think about employee experience, you often see teams where the individuals of the team say, you know what, I'd love to work in that team. I'd love to be part of that. They always look like they're having fun. They look like they know where they're going, and they seem to be so successful. And when we diagnose employee experience in these scenarios, and especially within our Facebook groups, we distill that in 4 or 5 main areas. The first area is the manager is the person that tends to communicate and set goals and be very, very clear around the intent and the purpose of the team. The leader is typically also very authentic and is able to share things as they are and approachable and vulnerable. And so in that way, the leader will develop trust with their team and connect every single person. The other component is they have fun along the way. They enjoy the work that they do because they have this empirical connection. And the last, and I'm going to say critical factor to the success of employee experience is feedback. And, you know, within Facebook, we have a pulse feedback, and every 6 months, we're able to share feedback with our managers and hear from our employees what's top of mind. And, you know, taking action on that feedback and being able to share with everybody openly and transparently, you know, the pulse of the organization, the sentiment of our people, and make sure that we take action as a result of that. The other way that we think about employee experience is how we connect every day, especially in the pandemic, through having huddles, you know, not necessarily team meetings, but coming together and talking about each other in a non-professional manner. And then the third area is through mental health and well-being, and really understanding how people are feeling, because we know there are blurred lines between our professional and our personal lives. And I'm sure we'll go into that in a bit more detail in a second. So when we say, do we believe it's the future? The future is people. And when we think about only people can, it's the decisions we make with people at the heart of those decisions. And that's how we thrive. And when we invest in our people are connected and they feel trusted and they create great business value. So that's my view on the future of employee experience, people being at the heart of the experience.
Thank you, Vicky. So that's purpose, authentic leadership, and giving feedback. I couldn't agree more. How about you, JP? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's you know, having listened to Vicky, I would say yes, and I'll just say whatever she said. But seriously, you know, if again, maybe just to put things in context, I was listening through who the people were on this call, and I guess most of them know the Ayala Group, but maybe just to put some dimensions into it. You know, Ayala is 186 years old, so we're fairly you know, we've been around the block for many years, and include, you know, so crises come and go, and I think you know, one of the things that people sometimes talk about, we were talking about this with Vicky before we started, is about resilience. But I think more than that, I think we're one of those companies that truly believe that the reason we're able to survive this long and thrive this long is because at the heart of it is really our people. Is really the people that makes it successful. Just earlier this week, last Tuesday, we celebrated our service awards and retirement awards, and you know, that's a very important part of our really our DNA, if you will. It's recognizing and giving tribute to the people who've spent their, you know, long careers. So one of the people who retired last Tuesday has 41 years of experience. I mean, she joined us when she was 18. and she's retiring now at 60. And so, you have people that literally spend their lives with us. Um, and I think it's really important that we celebrate those, because that's really part of the whole message that goes down as you now move and transition, intergenerationally to the younger employees. That um, really what makes these people stick around. And when and we have a program. We have a. It's very light. It's celebratory. We ask them to sort of like give their own response, and the stories they tell, about how they've learned, how they've grown, how we've taken care, how Ayala has taken care of their families through thick and thin. I think that's really important. Um, but why is it important? I think at the end of the day, we truly believe that the only way we will be able to engage with our customers and engage with our communities is if we have an engaged workforce. And that's the importance that we really put on employee experience. I think at the end of the day, the only thing that keeps us going is to make sure that we're taking care of our employees, so that then they can take care of their customers and they can take care of the communities we serve. And we've seen that a lot through the pandemic. And again, I'll be happy to talk a little bit more about that later on in the panel.
Right. So it's really putting the people at the heart of the business and making our people brand ambassadors of our organization. All right, moving to our next discussion point. Building an employee experience covers a lot of touch points, from recruiting to onboarding, L&D, workflow, and offboarding. Now, my question goes to JP. Like, how does Ayala Corporation ensures a seamless process for its employment from the moment they first show an interest in your company to the day they walk out the door?
Great question. If you think about it, again, to put things in perspective, we have 11 verticals, no, basically sectors that we represent. So each one has their own market that they compete in. Each one has their own, literally their own corporate culture, if you will. But yet, what ties them together? And here's where the group that I had, which is Synergy and HR, comes together, because that for us, that's the glue that puts the whole, that diversity together. So we value the diversity, and yet we try to figure out what needs to be the same, what needs to make what are the elements of a culture that say we belong to Ayala. In fact, our tagline is "We are Ayala," that cuts across the whole group. And so to your question, in terms of, if we go through the life cycle, when we go to the marketplace, we used to compete with each other for talent. And then in 2009, and we've come together, and we now have one brand, which we call Careers at Ayala, or Careers at the Ayala Group, where any talent who wants to join us has that same experience, whether they're joining financial services or manufacturing or healthcare. It comes through one portal, so that then we treat it really as an intake, and then we deploy that across the group. We've done that through what are a very dynamic HR council. And our council is actually in 5 different areas. So we start with talent, which is our talent network, which is really the talent acquisition. So they manage our talent, our Careers at Ayala Group. And that goes from internships to campus recruiting, and everything that has to do with onboarding. Our next group that actually, in terms of the network in the Ayala HR Council, is our career group. And that is that's looking now after what are the different possibilities. The analogy that I like to have, and I think this is instructive, is many people still think of career ladders, right? Where you move up the rung. Our visual in the Ayala Group is that we are a rock climbing wall. We actually provide careers where people are, can go vertical, can go sideways. Sometimes they need to go down before they can go up. But what we want to offer is a diversity of careers, so that then they actually are able to move around the group in the event that there are opportunities for people for growth. So that's where our career network comes in. Then learning and OD is really, again, about how do we make sure that we're upskilling, we're giving them the right experience in terms of learning and development opportunities. Our fourth one is our rewards group, which is making sure that, again, we're motivating our people. But the last one is just, and certainly not the least, is our employee engagement group. And these are the people that just make sure that we have the activities, we have the events, we're engaging our employees. We monitor that through engagement surveys, whether it's formal surveys or through pulse surveys. But we do have that, and Vicky would love to hear this. We actually implemented Workplace just earlier this year, and we already have 12,000 people on our platform, considering we only started early this year. No? And so again, that's a very dynamic group, and we're looking at even adding more people as we move on the next year.
Right. It's really making the employee experience worthwhile for each and every employee that you have in Ayala Group. All right. Now, on to our next discussion point. According to the Edelman Trust Barometer Spring Update in 2020, only 29% of people believe that their CEOs are doing an outstanding job responding to COVID-19. And trust has never been more important or fragile than it is now, as teams are mostly remote or hybrid. To you, Vicky, as a leader, how do you build trust in your organization? Like, have you had changes in terms of your leadership style? And has there been any challenges in doing so?
Wonderful, Talon, and I'd love to hear JP's answer here, because after rolling out Workplace and connecting your organization, hearing from the CEO and being able to communicate through live to your organization is so powerful and so strong. But one of the areas I wanted to think about and talk through is the pandemic has done one thing, and that's really helped equalize every employee. It's broken down a lot of the hierarchy and the silos that happen. You see CEOs and leaders going live from their living rooms, from their bedrooms. It's a great equalizer. There's pets on people's laps. There's children coming in saying, "Mommy, Daddy, I'm hungry." And that is what breaks down the barriers and makes everybody human across an organization. And when we look at the role of the leader, and when I've looked at myself pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, I have to admit that I've had to change. I used to be a pretty stoic leader, be brief, be bright, be done. And now I've really had to think about, how do I feel? If I don't feel great, how do people around me feel? And be authentic in absolutely everything I do. And this is where I was having a conversation with Josh Burson, and we were talking about the role of the CEO. And the role of the CEO has changed to the Chief Empathy Officer. And really that applies across leadership in every organization. And it's where you consciously start with the person in mind, and you talk about the experience of and around the information that's being delivered. And so when I think about that, I have to lead with empathy. I have to be vulnerable, because we don't always have all of the answers. Now, some of the things that have transpired, throughout the pandemic is burnout. And there was a study that was recently done with Oracle and Workplace Intelligence. And in fact, this was probably a month ago. And it showcased that burnout within the execs are now higher than the employees. And it's because, that they feel like they've had to always be on. And so as leaders, we may not always have the answers. We may not always, have a solution to every problem. But as long as we give the real information around the situation, as long as we can genuinely share, what's top of mind, the implications around some of the decisions that are being made, and showing fear, or showing that, you're not always perfect, and that you don't have, a way to answer everything that gets raised immediately, and there are escalation processes. But I think showing that empathy around how you make decisions and bring people into the process has been so important for me as a leader, and thinking about how the chief empathy officer would apply in my role and in my team's role and in my leader's role, and holding each other accountable for that. Checking in with them around how they feel around information being delivered, and getting that feedback real time. So I think there's a lot of consciousness that happens, but the biggest thing that I've seen is burnout, and recognizing that burnout is real, and then doing something around it. One of the areas that was absolutely crucial during the pandemic was recognizing mental health and wellness. And I often do skip levels across the organization, and keep a finger on the pulse to see if everyone's feeling like they belong, and they're creating impact, and they have a voice. And I started noticing that people were just generally tired, and they lacked a bit of energy. And I did a survey amongst a person in every team. And together we formed a group that was a mental health and wellness committee. And we decided that every couple of months, we need to take time out in the organization to invest in ourselves. And whether that was to learn a new hobby, or reconnect with our partner, or go on a date, take our children out, or do something around spiritual wellness and connection, it really gave everybody in the team and the company the opportunity to think about mental health and well-being, to put ourselves first, and to make a point of calling out these days and creating a safe space for sometimes difficult discussions. I think something that's really changed is, in the past, people wouldn't say, "I'm not feeling great. My head isn't in the right place." And now, if we can do that as leaders, we allow our employees to do exactly the same thing. And it just gives people permission.
Yeah, can I answer that as well? Since Vicky asked me, she was interested in what we were doing.
Sure,
Um,
go ahead.
no, I think the when the pandemic hit, or no, sorry, when the lockdown started in Manila, and Vicky, we locked down on March 16th. It was a date that I think many of us remember. Um, I can remember right away. That was a Sunday, and by Sunday afternoon, I was on the phone with our chairman, and we immediately called for. I'm the secretariat, if you will, for our group management committee, which is all our CEOs. And so we convened on the Monday. The very next day, we went into crisis mode. And I remember that very first meeting, where we basically realized that yes, we had playbooks, yes, we had BCPs, yes, we had disaster things, but we basically said we have to throw all of this away. Um, None of us were prepared for this kind of a playbook, and really what happened was, as a management committee, we had daily meetings, um, just to share thoughts. We, as Jaime said, our chairman says, um, we were making up the playbook as the days went by, right? And so one of the things I think about the leadership that you could see in that dynamic, in that picture, is, number one, the humility that we didn't have the answers. Number two, that we had to rely on the wisdom of the team, um, and that this was going to be a collective effort. Number three, we were not afraid, to try new things and to think out of the box. And so one of the things that I remember on the second or third day of that week, um, we immediately made the decision that we were going to send out a message, and the chairman, and we basically worked on a chairman's message that went out to all employees across, all the 58,000 employees that we have around the group, and it went out the very next day to basically just tell everybody that even though we're on lockdown, number one, things will continue. Don't worry about people not being able to come to work. Even if you're on a no work, no pay basis, you will continue to receive your compensation. We are going to then make sure that we will accelerate some of the benefits and all of that we needed to do, or to give, even though they were later in the year. We made sure that we started looking at our medical programs. Would things like COVID be covered? If not, how are we going to do this? And so we relied with our healthcare unit, AC Health, to start putting protocols in place so that then we'll be able to, we developed a framework called the 4Ts. What we'll be able to triage, we'll be able to test, we'll be able to treat, and we'll be able to trace um, our own response for our own employees and their dependents. And by the way, I made the point that yes, we have 58,000 employees, but we have around 70,000 more who are not our employees, but are employees of our partners. And so therefore, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And so immediately we made again the decision that we need to look after this extended group of employees, if you will, and making sure that they were that we were taking care of them. All told, 9 months later, we probably had foregone in all total in terms of just financial support for for rent condonation for our tenants, and again it was fascinating because there was no question about it. When one of the CEOs suggested, this is going to be hard for our tenants. Many of them are SMEs, small and medium scale industries. Um, they won't be able to pay the rent because they're locked down. And so rather than why don't, so the suggestion was we'll condone the rent so that then they can pay their employees, through this hardship, and they can provide some cover for their employees. And so it was just spontaneous decision making, if you will, that I would characterize our group management committee in terms of the North Star, which is what's the right thing to do. Um, and and some financial implications and all of that didn't even come up into discussions that we had, but we just said this is what we needed to do to protect our employees, to protect our customers, and to protect the communities that we serve. Again, it's those that sphere really that we made sure that we were taking care of.
Right, great insights from Vicky and JP. I like it when Vicky mentioned about empathy, leading with empathy. It's really about asking your team members once in a while how they are, how's everything at home, how are they able to balance work and family time. And when JP said that no one is ever ready for this pandemic, I mean, the humility, relying on one another, and thinking outside the box, and for the leadership team to be able to make quick decisions to address the situation. All right. Moving on to our next discussion point. Building an employee experience means shifting to a more people-centric organization. An important step in doing so is giving employees a voice. And based on Gartner's study, 72% of employees feel that they do not have a voice. Now, from a leader and CHRO's perspective, Vicky and JP, how do you give your employees a voice?
Well, I think I already mentioned it. That one we did is we put Workplace by Facebook, right, Vicky? No, but seriously, it's funny, but again, self-reflecting with Jaime and Fernando, our CEO and COO. It's funny how we've actually become closer as a group through the pandemic because distance now didn't matter. Before you could actually have any interaction with any of our senior executives, you had to physically be in the room with them. But once we've transitioned that everything's now virtual, a lot of things change, and I'll give you some examples. While I said that we were on a daily meeting with our group management committee, we actually started having weekly town halls across all our businesses. And again, it was both to tell them what we knew and what we didn't know. Again, that humility has to come out, that we don't have all the answers, but we're working on it. And by the way, we'd welcome your suggestions. We don't have a monopoly of the answers here. We need everybody to help figure this out. And I think that messaging that just is more inclusive, and that we value the diversity and we value the thoughts, that made us change tremendously. So we moved from resilience towards transformation, towards pivot. How do we now change things? And it was through this engagement that we actually received so many suggestions and so many thoughts from all employees. But you need to provide that opportunity to actually have that two-way dialogue. So I think that's number one. Number two, one of the things is we continued to move on our learning platform, our e-learning platform. And again, before when we'd hold a, we have this thing called leader conversations, we'd be limited by physical space. So we'd have about 70 or 80 people in a room on a first come, first serve basis, right? So we started putting our leader conversations online, and guess what? With 600, 700 people attending all of a sudden, right? And everybody's interacting. Um, and so to some extent, like I said, when at the start of this, I think what has happened under this pandemic, under this situation, is it made us pivot. It made us open to new ways of doing things, and the net effect is that we're actually much closer as an organization because we're able to connect much more effectively as a group.
All right. How about you, Vicky?
Thanks, Talon, and JP, some great examples there, and thank you for showcasing just some of the great work that Workplace does. It's funny, just further to the Gartner statistic that was shared, we recently ran a deskless, not voiceless research study in APAC, and it was revealed basically 54% of frontline managers missed out on important information relating to safety and process. Now, we ask ourselves, why was this? And we think about the disconnect between HQ and frontline. In HQ, 90% of leaders use email and rely on emails, and employees rely on mobiles, they rely on WhatsApp, they rely on messaging apps. And so when a headquarter is talking through their corporate systems and people in the field are communicating through the device they've got in front of them, because they're not carrying around big technology, and they don't use and need the same systems as people do in HQ, the frontline gets left behind. And this is where our voice gets diluted. And we have to make absolutely sure that we provide technology to our organization wherever they are, and that we streamline the communication standard. And it needs to be simple and it needs to be easy to use. We can't think about an HQ set of tools and a frontline set of tools. So that's the first thing. And then the second area I want to showcase, and it's so similar to the examples that JP has given for Ayala, but it's around Scoot Airlines. And during the pandemic, the CEO of Scoot, there was a new CEO, and he came back after being away for a while, part of the SIA group. And dealing with a new CEO during a pandemic is difficult. And so there were several things that were absolutely core to Campbell, as he initiated himself into the role. And the first thing was interacting with all of his employees. Daily updates and posts around what was top of mind, health and safety procedures. He also became the face of employee engagement. So he was the showcase. He was the role model of, he wanted to be seen and be treated the way that he wanted everybody in the organization to feel and be treated. And then he ran the pulse surveys, he ran the sentiment checks, he shared in town halls what the results were, and good or bad, they addressed them head on. And then they checked in with managers. They had a manager check-in process to make sure that managers were checking in with people across their organization. And when there were questions that were surfaced, he ensured that there was a forum in which they could address all of those questions. So when I think about, how we give people a voice, there's many ways that we can do it, but it starts with leadership. And if leadership are behind giving employees a voice, technology and HR and our operations and how we sell and go to market will all naturally and organically follow. And I think JP spoke earlier around career rungs, and that is so important, because when we think about employee experience, we think about why we belong to an organization. How do we as employees feel in our journey? And when we can ask questions around careers and where we're going, where the organization is going, how aligned are we to the purpose and vision. When a leader is transparent, it ties into what the employee is wanting to do and wanting to achieve. And you feel like you have more access to growth within those organizations. So again, top down, bottoms up, it's a framework of every single part of the business coming together and unifying.
Thanks, Vicky and JP. So it's really maximizing all communication channels, all platforms, WhatsApp, MS Teams. Make meet as often as you can. Daily huddles, from monthly, quarterly town halls to weekly town halls, just like what JP mentioned earlier, and of course, workplace from Facebook. All right. So before we proceed with our roundtable discussion or the Q&A portion, maybe we can ask Vicky and JP to at least share two of the most important advice for our leaders who are joining in the call today who would like to kickstart change in their organization. Vicky, what would your advice be?
So two key areas, and between JP and I think we've touched on many of them, but it's about knowing the framework for employee experience. There's 5 things that I think about. Set goals, number 1. 2, be visible. 3, be engaged. You can't be in the background when you want to create a great employee experience. 4, you need to capture attention. Sending an email is not the way that you capture people's attention. That's just a business process. It's business continuity, but it's about videos, it's about posts, it's about sharing, it's about experiences. And then it's about our purpose. So sticking to the point, demonstrating that focus. And so when you stick to the point, people are aligned. They align to your mission, and they know where you're going, and they know what's expected of them. So those are the 5 areas that I would say is connected to the framework of employee experience. That's the first area. The second area is about starting with leadership. Ensure that leadership are on the journey. Starting a process and an initiative from the ground up is tough, but get buy-in. Understand the intent of the CEO, and look how you can tie in the purpose and the objectives with the CEO mission to employee experience, and you've got a winning combination.
How about you, JP?
There you go. I was saying that Vicky and I have touched a lot of this already, but I think what's important, if I were to summarize, is a lot of the things that happen has to be shared. I think if very few people are aware of how things are being done and how decisions are being made, it will be very difficult for them to understand the why. They'll only see the what, they won't understand the why, but they also have to understand the how. So I think number 1 is the visibility of our top leaders in action. And that's the reason why I mentioned earlier, we were getting together, but all of our CEOs, all of our CHROs were at the front lines, communicating, making sure that they were dealing with the issues that needed to be addressed. Whether we were on a skeleton workforce, essential workers, how are we going to protect them? So there's a lot of visibility, and I think the fact that we had the platforms that we were able to share, what was going on helped tremendously. Number 2 is acting quickly. We can't have the analysis paralysis taking place here because, like I said, we didn't have the playbook. And you just needed to trust your instinct. You just needed to trust each other, and you just needed to trust the wisdom of the team. And that's why I said I think what's important is the collective wisdom coming together. Our HR council was meeting again every week, because we were just sharing. And so if Globe, for example, had this practice, we would basically shamelessly borrow and implement it across the whole group. And if IMI was doing this because they had a global footprint, we would then be able to use some of their learnings from elsewhere. And so it's that openness across our businesses that makes us as strong as we are. It's because it is the collective wisdom of the group. Um, and then, like I said, we were sharing this and we were communicating this across to the group, to all our employees. They knew what was going on. We were active on both public and intranet, on social media. We were sharing stories. We actually developed a video, and if you want, anybody, it's available. It's called chronicles.ayala.com. And it is actually a collection, a collage of stories of all our frontline workers, and how we've given tribute to all of them, that kept us afloat. While many of us were at work from home, when the pandemic started, only 6% were going to work because everything was restricted, and then 94% were working from home. That moved quickly to a 20% by April. 20% were coming to the work, were reporting for work, and 80% were still working from home. So that was around April. By May, that was almost like 40% that were coming to their workplace. So we did have essential workers, if you will, that kept the rest of the conglomerate alive. And so this was a tribute that we actually put together for them. And I think that sharing of experiences again helps everybody make sure that they feel that they are part of something bigger, that no task is too small, whether you're packing medicines and PPEs in a warehouse because we're going to distribute this to some far-flung areas. They all felt that it was important work, and we were recognizing that, and we were making sure that we were celebrating everybody's contribution to this. So I think, if in a nutshell, I think it's really, again, as Vicky said, how do you make sure that this goes out and is communicated properly so that people do feel that they're part of something bigger than themselves?
Wow, great sharing, JP and Vicky. And we can't wait to watch that video. Hope you
It's
can
actually
share
a
the
whole
link.
website. It's actually a whole
Okay.
website. So there's stories, there's
Mhm.
vignettes, there's videos, but we created a microsite just for it. So again, welcome to have everybody look into it.
Right. Okay, so I'm sure our leaders here can't wait to hear more inputs from our speakers. So we now move on to our roundtable discussion where you can ask questions or share your thoughts on the topic employee experience. Think I saw some questions coming in the chat box from one of our leaders, from Jerry. As business leaders, we need to ensure that our investment and effort to employee experience would equally impact good numbers in the operations. So what KPIs or metrics are you going to use to directly measure employee experience with customer experience? Anyone who would like to answer? Vicky, JP?
Sure, I'm happy to start that discussion. So there are a couple of things. I think the first thing that we look at are polls and surveys. Understanding how people are feeling in the organization, and you have a starting point, and you measure, temperament. You measure success. You measure things like how long do they intend to stay in their role? How long do they expect to see success in their role? And so I think there are a couple of ways and metrics that we'd look at outside of the success of the work we do. So we always have to be thoughtful around our job and our job function. And so that's always one KPI. The other area is how connected is my team? What is the sense of belonging within the team? What does diversity look like in our team? And when you look at metrics around, polls and surveys and pulse checks that actually reflect increase or decreases, that's directly going to affect the operations and the impact you're making as a business. And I think sometimes we could overthink that if we over-index an employee experience, we're going to defocus from business outcomes. But we need to think about a connected organization is a performing organization. And so I would directly tie in, and exceeding business goals would be related to connecting, communicating, and making sure people are growing together in their roles. JP.
Yeah. It's funny, but we were just having a discussion with our board meeting today, and we were discussing really interim results and all of that, and really, as our chairman said, yes, we set up KRAs at the start of the year, but really, um, those are now for reference, because if you really think about it, none of us could have predicted what was going to happen in 2020 when we set those budgets a year ago. Um, and so even that is now being taken with a grain of salt. And basically, the question really is, how is performance going to be measured this year? And a lot of it is actually going to be, while, like I said, while financial and real metrics are still there, I think a lot of qualitative factors are actually going to be part of the whole assessment for performance this year. And that's probably the same with employee experience and customer experience. Because again, if you think about customer experience, let's take our malls. There's really hardly any customer experience to think of when the malls have been shut for the last 8 months, right? And so the question now is, how do you engage, and how quickly did we help, for example, in our malls, how did we help our tenants make the pivot? So we started providing delivery services. We started providing, we have an app now called Zing. We have a concierge called, an online concierge for our malls. So again, it's just helping that whole community be able to engage with the outside world. Um, in our water utilities, it's funny, but Viber became the way that each of our territory managers were engaging with their customers on the ground. And those Viber groups have been very active in terms of, there's a water leak here, can you please come in? And, but that was our way of actually connecting with our customers. And so I think one of the things that has come out through this pandemic is how quickly our own frontline managers had to pivot to make sure that they are responding to their different customers, to their communities. And like I said, if before, I think Vicky was saying, if before everything was top down, email-driven culture, everything had to be approved by corporate. Because of this, innovation just exploded, because we were basically saying, do what you need to do to get your jobs done. Um, and there's the expression, don't ask for, you can ask for forgiveness rather than asking for permission. And I think when you empower your employees to do what needs to get done so that the job gets done, you'd really be surprised at how so much innovation has been going on in connecting with customers, connecting with communities, connecting with the outside world, and of course, even connecting with our employees.
All right, thank you, JP and Vicky. I think we have a couple more minutes for another question. This was sent to us privately. How do you keep unit heads in check, especially if they function as brand ambassadors of stakeholders? How do you ensure that they properly communicate to their teams what management is trying to cascade? Anyone who
Well,
would like to answer
yeah.
that?
Well, like I said, I think at the end of the day, it was really just giving that example that we were open and that we didn't have all the answers, and that we did welcome suggestions coming from the employees. And the best thing is that we acted on them. Um, I think it's one thing when the reason suggestion systems many times don't work is that people feel that they put a suggestion in the suggestion box, and then there's a visual there when we had our innovation forum 2 weeks ago, of a photo of a suggestion box where the lock is rusted, and you can be seen that it has never been opened. And so when you have an artifact like that, and people will just stop doing it. But when you actually are getting suggestions, and our employees or our customers feel that it's being acted on, then it creates that virtuous cycle, if you will, that they listen. And we all know that we're all employees, we're all customers. The last thing we'd want is we express our opinions, or we give feedback, or we give suggestions, and they don't listen. And then after a while, you just forget about it, and you don't get engaged. But if you feel that you are being listened to, then and being acted upon, then I think at the end of the day, that's really what drives that whole culture of engagement and employee experience.
Okay. And I see some comments in the chat box. I think Ayla shared the link to the chronicles2020.ayala.com. We have a question. I think somebody raised her hand. Is that Ruby? Ruby, would you like to go on mute?
Good afternoon, Vicky and JP. Thank you for your great insights. My question is really, we are in executive search. Your sense of belonging as a very important aspect in dealing with the EX now is both in your agenda. And my question is really, what are your top of mind best experimental practices so far for hires that you did on an executive level, or even in the less significant but equally important hires in your organization? I mean, Ayala is so big, Facebook as well. So I really would be very interested to hear your insights. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you so much. Such a great question. And I tell you what, hiring is a tough job. I take my hats off to everybody whose full-time job is hiring, because, you know, everybody wants to be a great candidate. Everybody wants to be, you know, a great leader, and it's not easy to find the best person with the best fit for your job. But there are a couple of things that are absolutely critical when I think about leadership and hiring strong leaders. And I think, you know, there's 4 defining characteristics that are key to me. The first is when I meet an individual, how quickly can they articulate their purpose? How quickly can they talk about why they want to do what they do? Like, where are they going? Whether it's with Facebook or whether it's with somebody else, like what journey are they on? And being able to define that purpose with great intent and passion. The second area is how quickly can you build trust with that person? And it's very hard when you have, you know, an hour or 2 hours with an individual, with the leader, to establish trust. And, you know, I feel like when we talk about connecting people, when we talk about experiences that managers have had in their past, you can quickly assess how, you know, where people are on their barometer. And I find that, you know, trust is something that is earned, and it's something that you can't measure, you know, in a conversation, because it has to be proven. But when you talk about people and their teams and how their teams would speak about them, and success that their teams have had, there's simple words like what we did together versus what I achieved. And I think that's just one example that often stands out, is when we think about our people and how we don't just take the journey on our own, we take our people with us. The other area is, you know, how authentic is the individual in the process? Are they just demonstrating great KPIs and their success with all of their medals, or are they telling us stories? Are they able to articulate not only the greatness that they've been through, but also the difficulty? And, you know, I love learning about the difficulty and walking in somebody else's shoes, because that's when I really understand motivation. I understand what drives them. And so, you know, having a conversation with someone and understanding where they've failed, to me, is where they've succeeded. Because if you can recognize failure, there's a strength right there. And if you can learn from it and look at how you move on and be willing to share that, again, it's a sign of a great leader. So those are sort of the areas that I look for when I think about employee experience and leadership and hiring strong, great leaders. And, you know, you see that. In fact, one of the examples I wanted to share is Mark Zuckerberg just recently gave the entire organization the week of Thanksgiving off. And that's a huge thing, you know, 70,000 people in an organization taking 3 days to 5 days off. And when people go back and they say a simple thing like, thank you, Mark, we really appreciate that. It's not part of our PTO. It's just an act of kindness, and we recognize what our people need. That's when you think about true leadership. We're not just thinking about ourselves, we're thinking about everybody. And that's the difference between the I and the we's.
Thank you, Ruby. And thank you, Vicky, for your insights. Let me read a few comments from the chat box. This is from Lourdes Licia. Their chairman sent messages to all employees across the country. And talking about humility, we do not have all the answers and listen to employees. Communication with employees via HR's e-kamustahan to check on them and listen to their concerns and issues. HR is indeed in the forefront. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, so I think we still have time for a couple more questions. Anyone else who would like to raise a question to our speakers?
I would love to hear from JP or Beta about what they best practice so far from their experiments with employee engagement, particularly with fairly newer hires. Thank you.
Hi, Ruby. No, I was mindful of time because they told us that this was only until 4 o'clock. When I saw it 4 o'clock, that's why I didn't answer anymore. And that's the only reason why I kept quiet. But if they're going to be giving us time, no, I think at the end of the day, we've had a number of senior executives who've joined us, by the way, during the pandemic. So zero physical contact. And yet they've been able to hit the ground running. And I think what's important is as seniors come in, we don't just drop them off on the deep end. I think at the end of the day, we in HR, my HR executive committee, which are the CHROs of all our verticals, really spend a lot of time doing first pre-work, making sure that we know the type of executive we're looking at. Do we need somebody that's more command and control because they need to do this? Do they need somebody that's more participative and democratic? Because this is what the kind of culture that we're, but even though you have different management styles, we always try to make sure that everybody understands that, but the values cannot be compromised. There are certain norms that how we do things here. And that's really where the role of the CHRO comes in, to provide that kind of guidance, so that then they come in and they are effective from day one. And so, yes, there'll be some bumps in the road, but like I said, we've had a number of senior executives who've come in during the pandemic, have had zero face-to-face contact and are doing great. And their teams love them. And in fact, we were saying, maybe there's also a halo effect because they're coming in here under very difficult circumstances and are able to actually do things that normally they wouldn't have been able to do. It's going to be a fascinating, dissertation eventually when people start looking at pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, during the pandemic, how have things changed? But at the end of the day, it goes back to what we said. It's just constant communication. There is some there's a lot of guidance coming in, but we don't interfere. And I think that's finding the right balance. You don't want to micromanage, but at the same time, you do want to be able to provide some guidance on how things are done. And I think that's where the role again of the CHRO comes in, because that's when you can actually really make a big difference in how an executive or a manager comes in and how effective they can be.
All right, thank you, JP. Hope that answers your question, Ruby.
Yes, thank you.
All right. And as I get my cue, I hate to cut this for now and might need to wrap up our session. So for those who still have questions for Vicky and JP, don't worry. We will share with you their email addresses so you can get in touch with them, and we'll send you a copy of the final notes regarding today's presentation. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us today and for sharing your thoughts. Thank you, Vicky and JP, for gracing our panel discussion today. And thank you to everyone for spending your afternoon with us. We look forward to inviting you again on our future events. Keep safe, everyone. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Keep safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Vicky.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, JP. Have a super evening.
You too.
Thank you, JP.
You're welcome. Thank you also. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And thank you, Vicky.